Well, we've got a good number of things here. I guess start off with my copies of Pokemon X and Y have arrived. Although I haven't even taken them out of their plastic. I doubt there's anything particularly noteworthy. They don't feel heavy, so it doesn't even seem like they'll have that big of a documentation. Come on, plastic. Break. There were limited edition versions. I never noticed them. And I'm not sure how excited or into starting to play I am. I miss the Pokemon, but at the same time, not much energy to start that up. It's probably the same anyways. Then of course we got stuff that arrived, and we got this, which it's a bit easier to open that way than the normal way that they intend you to. So we do that, and let's just begin with these Kokoro Connect, 13 episodes, 3 discs, complete TV series, 13 episodes, 2 discs, Blu-ray version, which is about expected. There is a good question of why this is sticking. Sometimes they stick. Well, all I can do is get as much of it off as I'm willing to tolerate in this small period of time. And I guess before we poke around in there, we want to open this one out, because like most other Sentai releases, this one's both A and B. Like so many Sentai releases, it's not unusual for them to share the same disc art. It's kind of interesting to know what's the same and what's different. Don't even know who these characters are, so they seem to be specific characters on the discs. And this would be the character. It's not even the same character arts, are they? They've actually got a bit more emotion to them, I guess, in these Blu-ray discs. Not sure why these aren't wanting to spin. Oh well. Next up, we've got Funimation's re-release of Sakura Wars the movies, which of course I bought because this is the Blu-ray release of it. So we've got our DVD edition and our Blu-ray edition, and an image on the inside of a person whose name I can't remember, because I feel lucky to remember any names. I mean, like, I watched Campion recently, and so I can remember Athena's name, but Athena's a name that you can kind of know beforehand. We got Blood Sea, The Last Dark, which I would guess is a movie that's maybe a sequel to the series Blood Sea, which is somehow related to the Blood universe. Maybe if it's not another reboot, I don't know. Not entirely. I'm just all I know is it calls itself Blood Sea, and I'm going to maybe prioritize watching it since it's just a single movie. And here we have our DVD. And I mean, I know it's the Blu-ray version. I just want to make sure I can find the Blu-ray symbol. And we've got the picture, most likely Saya, on the back. Guess on that note, Sakura Wars is A and B. Blood Sea is only A, though. Next up, let's get this out of the way real quick. Hentai. Basically, there's a re-release of Maid Service that's supposedly going on next year, so I pre-ordered it, and it arrived now. I'll have to figure out which copy this is. But it's a hentai release, so let's not dig into details. Speaking of Campion, obviously I showed the Blu-ray version last week or something like that, and here's the DVD version. And I'll probably talk a bit more about my opinion of it in a bit. For now, we've got the real thing to deal with, which is, or the final thing, which may be the more important thing, I don't know, which is Sword Art Online Volume 3. And we got both the DVD and the Blu-ray versions. Bonus content, second season text list opening. So, this artwork makes perfect sense given the context of the show. Kind of glad that I got it ahead of time, otherwise I might have complained in advance of having watched it, because I did complain in advance. So this is pretty much your Aniplex standards, which is a card that's the proof of purchase, the poster, disc insert information, and then you got 2 discs, which can reflect the camera very, very, very effectively. Yeah, it's supposed to be like that. Maybe not too easy to see on the camera. And then we've got, of course, the more important, because it's more expensive and has more features, a Blu-ray version, which features Asuna's rapier on the back. And let's see, can we make a little platform for me to throw these on? So obviously this is what was on the back of it when it arrived. So we've got the Blu-ray disc, which is very much like the DVD version, except far less reflective. Different background, of course, but basically the same front and back image. Below that we've got the second soundtrack, which I don't know if I have as much of an opinion on yet. We got an illustration booklet 3, which includes more illustrations, I guess, the most obvious. Let's see, next up we've got some more postcards. I'm trying to remember if all the other releases had them or just one of the others. But, oh well, doesn't really matter, because the goal here is just take a peek. I haven't even taken a look at these myself, because I'm just not in any rush. If you watch the other couple versions, you may notice that there's at least one new character, yes? There are a couple more, of course, but I don't know. I'll talk about that shortly. So, getting them back in can be rather tricky just because of the sticky nature of the packaging. We have here an advertisement that I haven't opened up. It has a Sword Art Online card in it, of some sort in it. And I do believe, if we shuffle this around, we can see Sword Art Online trading card game. There's a trial deck of some sort. So there's a Sword Art Online collectible card game, apparently. And then we've got our standard proof of purchase. We want to hear from you. And, of course, the obligatory... Giga Frost is saving the piece of paper from the back for some reason. So, there we go. That's all of this week's new anime DVDs. I think better this week. And I was a bit worried because these 4 didn't ship until about 24 hours ago. So, it was looking like they weren't going to show up. But they did. So they got to be in the update. I get to be happy about that. So let's see. Well, I guess I'll just talk about the anime I watched in the order I watched them. To begin with, I obviously prioritized watching Sword Art Online Volume 3. Now, I think I mentioned that Volumes 1 and 2 end the first story arc, and 3 starts the second, and the way the first story arc ended, I didn't want there to be any more of the anime. So obviously, watching Volume 3 was actually a rather scary thing, which is exactly why I tackled it first. And I don't have a solid opinion yet. I can say that it is pretty meh, and I have a lot of reasons for saying that, but I can't really do that without spoiling too much Sword Art Online itself. I guess part of the problems is that if you compare this story arc to the previous one, it feels like they shoehorned something in for this story. Like it's kind of out of place. And along similar lines, it doesn't really feel like it's as important. Because the thing that draws you in the Sword Art Online is this sort of understanding that our main character, the events that happen in the game aren't really about the main character so much as the main character's a part of them, and the characters around him are a part of the events. But it's also about how, because it's not about him, he kind of stands out. Or rather, despite the fact that it's not about him, he kind of stands out. Something like Campion, which I also watched, is kind of like, oh yes, you've become a king, a Campion, which is basically what I guess the God Slayers in that anime become. And that one's just like, okay, that means that you are automatically special by definition, whereas Sword Art Online doesn't play by that rule. Instead it says, it plays kind of more similar to High School of the Dead in that regard. So if you watch High School of the Dead and you are indifferent about the zombie apocalypse concept and are more interested in the people stuck in a video game idea, and you want there to be less fan service, you may find something like Sword Art Online to be right up your alley, simply because there's kind of a similar idea. The main characters of both aren't necessarily spectacular people. A lot of the people around him tend to be, but it kind of shows up why, you know, he's not being singled out because of the events, but we, the viewer, watch him because of how they develop. And Volume 3, I feel, is where Sword Art Online is beginning to kind of lose that sort of focus. The other problem with Volume 3 is Volumes 1 and 2 actually represent a very good break in the series, where it transitions from a kind of macro point of view that, again, is about how this individual is incorporated into becoming important, versus Volume 2, where by then it's about where that importance leads them. Volume 3, it pretty much doesn't really advance anything along those lines. It's sort of, well, okay, the problem is why Volume 3 is a bad stopping point. And that's because it's at it where it was when it started, with just a little bit more information. Basically, it's not developing as quickly as Volumes 1 and 2 did, and it's not giving up those stopping points I told you about, where Volume 1 is, it's on the verge of transitioning from macro to micro viewing of events, and Volume 2 to 3, where Volume 2 ends the first story arc and Volume 3 starts the second one. And that's the problem. Volume 3 starts the second one, but it doesn't really have, it doesn't appear to have anything that would make you think, oh yes, it's going to treat the second half different, and it's rather in the middle of the things it's telling. So, fortunately, I only have to wait a month or 3 weeks or something like that for the fourth and final volume, unless, of course, they make more of the anime, and then I have to wait a couple of years for it to come out here in the States, I guess. But, if I've been suggesting to my friends that have watched Sword Art Online, the ones who watched Volumes 1 and 2 with me, I said, if you can wait a month, wait for me to get Volume 4 so we can watch Volumes 3 and 4 together. At the same time, like I said, there's nothing about Volume 3 thus far that has really ruined what happened in the first story arc in any regards. It's just, again, it kind of lost the focus of what made Sword Art Online interesting, I thought. Or some of the elements that at least made it interesting to me would probably be a more accurate way to say it. And maybe Volume 4 could do something to retroactively ruin my impression of the first story arc, but maybe it won't. So that's why I'm saying it's pretty meh. It's got its amusing part. It's got more awkward parts than the first 2 volumes had. So I'm still evaluating it, and it's my understanding that maybe the manga goes on longer than even these 2 story arcs, which has me curious, but I won't have much to say about it until I finish Volume 4 and kind of have an idea. Whereas High School of the Dead, you know, since I've started comparing the 2, that one ends at a place where it's like, yeah, they could still do more interesting zombie things. The person who created this story might have other interesting ideas to explore. Or it might pull a Walking Dead and then become a completely drama-filled season with some interesting things happening, non-drama and drama-like, but not quite what drew you in the series, I guess. So, those aside, One Piece Season 5, Voyage 3. I think I mentioned last time that it spent half of the DVD, Voyage 5, Season 5 Voyage 2 spent almost half of the DVD release just doing flashbacks. So fortunately, since that was all gotten out of the way, Volume 3 has actually been pretty good, considering a lot of the setup for what happens in this DVD was actually taken care of in the previous one. So the previous one wasn't a very exciting one, but this one was pretty decent with some interesting twists and some interesting reveals, I guess. And what can I say? I also kind of realized, and this is something I could have realized at the end of the previous volume, that One Piece is trying really hard to prevent itself from falling into some very common long-running shonen issues. Things like, oh, now it's going to be this character versus this character. A bunch of one-on-one battle setup. Bleach is especially guilty of doing this a lot. But this one wants to make all the little things happen interconnect. And saying that now, I realize that's kind of what One Piece has always done. It's just this has been the first situation I can think of where they've really set up, oh yeah, it's going to be one-on-one, and who's going to fight this? And it's like, oh, well, okay, 2 people have already crossed over, and 2 other people have already crossed over, and there's a lot of mix and matching just to shake things up and to prevent it from getting stale. It's delaying a couple of things, but nowhere near as bad as I think I started complaining about near the end of the 4th season for the beginning of the 5th season. Part of that could be that it's getting closer to the end of the 5th season, things are building up, which is always good. I would love to have watched some more, but unfortunately the release only has so many episodes on it, of course, and so I have to wait for the next one to come out. Next up, I watched We Without Wings. It was strange. I noticed that the anime kind of didn't give you a reason to be drawn to it other than maybe being interested or curious about the characters or just having something on to watch fan service. Like, it waited until a third of the way through the series before it even really gave you a interesting catch to it. And it was very interesting. I was wondering what it meant. And I have to say that in the end, it kind of boiled down to something I wouldn't call spectacular, but it was curious. I'm not sure if interesting is the right word, because I'm still not quite sure what to think about it. Overall, it was curious. I'm not quite sure what to make of it. It didn't strike me as something that's definitely good, but I don't know that I ever got at any... I don't think there was any point in this series watching it that I was thinking, this is bad. So, I don't know what to think about that. But after that, I watched Campion, and I have to say something about that I'm having trouble completely placing my finger on. Felt very refreshing. And I don't think it was because of We Without Wings. I think it's because it covered the stereotypical harem-ish sort of setup, but something was different about the way this was done. A part of me thinks it may be kind of similar to Sakura in that it sort of it kind of made the interactions between the main character and the members of his harem kind of a bit more convincing. It spent a lot more time working on that, I thought. This assumes I'm remembering Sakura right. Although I think most people tend to like it, so that might not be inaccurate. But unlike Sakura, this one falls under the category of our main character being a kind of nice guy badass, I guess. And it's okay. Although along certain lines, I guess if I'm going to talk about Sword Art Online, it's probably worthwhile to mention it's not a Sword Art Online, I guess. To a certain extent, our main character in Sword Art Online doesn't actually have an official harem so much as an unofficial one where a bunch of girls like him, but they don't really hang around him because I think I've commented that that's one of Sword Art Online's high points, where these characters aren't forming little gangs of people centered around the main character. They just happen to come and go. Everybody's living their own lives in that one. But that aside, our main character in Sword Art Online is defined as a badass, and another thing that I really respect about him is he's not dense enough that he can't read what the characters actually mean. So Campion plays with the main character who's intentionally dense, I guess. But he has a power, and I thought it was a very interesting power in the way the power develops. Not sure how much I think about its limitation, how artificial it feels, but at least the concept of the idea of somebody being a god slayer, I think this one kind of worked it better than Eden's Boy. I don't even know why I suddenly remembered that Eden's Boy had the concept of the god slayer in it, because I don't even remember what happened in it other than the two bad guy minions who were always funny. Oh well, it's all strange stuff. But I guess that's pretty much everything I've watched. Doesn't seem like a whole lot of stuff, but I guess things happened. I'm trying to remember what all happened. I mean, I know I lost half the weekend to a brother coming over, and we watched Sword Art Online because he hadn't seen any of it yet. That's always important. There's usually other days. Oh well, and maybe it's a bit more than maybe I've watched a bit more than I thought, because that's still about 1 3/4 of a series almost. Probably closer to, no, yeah, that's right, 1 3/4. You know, assuming your average series is about 24 to 26 episodes. Why does that sound familiar? Oh yeah. Okay, so there we go. That's pretty much everything I've watched. Stuff coming out. It might be a complicated couple of weeks. I know, like, next week was mostly going to be the 2 Gatchaman releases that are coming out. The Gatchaman re-releases. But I think those got pushed out into November. But the Blu-ray release of Wings of Honeyami-sei, is that right? That old, I think it's a Gainax movie about space shuttle something that I haven't watched yet. Yeah, I think the Blu-ray release for that ended up getting pushed out to next week, so that's going to happen. And Thursday is when the Little Witch Academia Blu-rays are supposed to ship, which means there's a chance it might actually be here in time for next week. Here's hoping. But other than that, that seems like there's not a whole lot of stuff for next week, so it might be a quick update, or it might be a mostly me talking about stuff I watched update. So I guess we'll have to find that out. Other than that, I can't think of anything particularly noteworthy to talk about. So, y'all, have a nice week.